financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions. We've already had a couple of false starts on this podcast, but hopefully this recording sticks. Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, is joined by Paul Kuharsky, and I've been corrected so many times on what he's actually doing these days that I'll just leave it up to him. But Paul and I go way back to the ESPN days when I covered the AFC East. He covered the AFC South. He's based in Nashville, and he's joining Matthew Fairburn of The Athletic, who also covers the Bills, Jonah Bronstein of the New Bronstein Times. You can ask him all about that, Paul. Paul Kuharsky joining us, and I'm excited for it because he's porky, and we're going to have a good time.
These guys must be so annoyed by me already for the false starts and all that.
You have no audio, asshole.
I'm live. I'm not.
There you are.
There you go.
I was never muted there. I'm telling you, a lot of this technology issue that's going on with us is on your side, and it's being blamed on me. And all I'm doing is trying to be a good guest, entertaining guest. Your friends here think I'm a jerk because we had false starts and we talk to each other this way. And I've done nothing but try to come on here, advertise my my products, and inform people about a team that not enough people know about. So I'm really an innocent victim here. And I don't know how this happened. I was driving backwards to get to this appointment, like Jim Rockford.
Yeah, when we first logged on with Paul, he's actually got his arm draped over the passenger seat, chin over his shoulder, looking behind him. Yeah, this was like Rockford Files or Beretta, maybe. There was a good scene going.
But I'm sure your pod does very well and everything, but I think none of you should wear hats. I don't know why everybody feels like they should wear hats and look like slobs on their pods. I mean, put on a collared shirt, at least like this, and look like you're going to work.
Well, Paul, some of us have hair, and when you're not having a good hair day, you got to hide it with a hat.
If you have hair, then you should be really proud to not wear a hat. If anybody should be wearing a hat, it's me, and I never wear a hat on the air. Nor should you guys. I'm done with the instructive part, but take my advice. It'll help your product.
Thank you, Paul. Why don't you tell us about all your products?
PaulKuharsky.com. I think the most successful personal website anybody's done when they were, not renewed by some place like ESPN.com because they didn't get along with crappy middle management like you didn't either. And, so I charge a monthly fee, or you can pay a yearly fee, and then you get an unfiltered guy who says whatever the bleep he wants about the Titans without middle management saying, hey, which Titan would make the best WWE wrestler? Give us a piece on that. So I don't write any BS like that. I write what I want. My people like me writing what I want. And then the radio station here tried to get control of my website, which was preposterous, and the Titans were meddling in that. And so I'm at Outkick 360, where I do the same radio show I did with my two guys, Chad Withrow and Jonathan Hutton, for 9 years. And we're allowed to talk about whatever we want. It's all sports and pop culture in our lives, but nobody's telling us what we can talk about or can't talk about.
For the record, I was renewed.
For the record, you were renewed, and you declined. That was big. At that stage, that was really big.
Yeah, it was a powerful feeling, actually, to be able to say I don't need it.
Mine was a powerless feeling. I'll admit it was a powerless feeling. But everybody tells you at a stage like that you'll come out better in the end, which is, I thought, BS. Can we swear on here or no?
Yeah, I already called you an asshole.
I thought that was bullshit, but it turned out to be true. But this is enough about me. You want to talk about like Julio Jones and Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry.
But here's the thing. We want to set a foundation for the podcast.
Now you got barking dogs. You got hats, no collars, and barking dogs. This is a real damn circus.
It's a hootenanny.
Yeah.
Hey, we actually do well. We actually do. We do well. We're sponsored. We make money.
Are you going to hold up a sheet of paper with the sponsor's name on it like you did last time I was there?
That never happened.
Yeah, it was your radio thing. You were around 3 microphones and you had.
Oh, that was the radio station. That was the radio station did that. I do actual reads, and there's a graphic element on the YouTube, and they get plugs on the Twitter.
Good. I hope that they're paying you what you're worth, more than what. This is my plea for them to raise what they're paying you right now, for it mostly to go to the other 2 guys.
Shampoo, Travis, Besaw, and Kirshner, CPAs and business consultants.
Everybody needs a good CPA.
Paul, the reason I wanted you to lay out all of the places where people can find you, of course, we have a Buffalo-dominated audience. And I believe, and the reason I wanted to have you on, is to talk about probably the overlooked Bills rival heading into 2021, because everybody wants to focus on the Kansas City Chiefs, and let's measure ourselves against the team that beat us in the AFC Championship game. But the Titans have always been pretty good, and of course just got better with the addition of Julio Jones in a trade. So now an offense that Todd Downing, the offensive coordinator, seems to have a lot at his disposal, similarly to what Brian Daboll has in Buffalo.
Yeah, I like the Bills a lot. I would think Bills fans weren't too happy with that result last year after the long COVID layoff for the Titans and all that controversy. And everybody expected the Titans to come out dead and flat. And instead, they dominated down here. It seems like they're playing every year now, too. And I think there'll be 2 of the teams fighting and pushing at Kansas City, though I don't know if either of them have quite what it takes. Titans offense should be pretty good. I mean, they lost Corey Davis and Johnny Smith, 2 good players. Smith, I think, really hurts. And they haven't done anything at tight end. But Julio Jones practiced for the first time yesterday. Yes, it's an OTA and all of that. But you want to know how healthy he is, right? And he jumped right in. He looked fast, energetic, did everything cut-wise, motion-wise, movement-wise. And I think Ryan Tannehill throwing to A.J. Brown, Julio Jones as co-number ones or whatever you want to call them, Josh Reynolds, well cast as a 3, and all of that keyed around Derrick Henry in the backfield and the play action it creates. Offensive line that's only replacing one guy that gets Taylor Lewan back at left tackle. If Todd Downing, like you mentioned, can pick up anything close to what Arthur Smith left behind, should be a pretty potent offense. And then the question is, can their defense go from like 29th and all-time bad 3rd down, doesn't sack the quarterback, to middle of the pack? If so, this team should be in the thick of things. I think it's a better team than the Colts. I don't know why everybody likes the Colts so much. And I'd put them in a class with the Bills and maybe Cleveland and Baltimore as the teams chasing Kansas City and what should be a really entertaining AFC with a lot of quality contenders.
Got a couple more questions about the Titans, obviously, but tell me, what is it about the Colts that you think has them insufficient?
Well, they're not very good at receiver or cornerback. It doesn't seem like they did a lot to address either of those spots. And I'm also not convinced that by merely putting Carson Wentz back with Frank Reich, everything's magically fixed in one offseason. I would think that it would take some time to work through some of those issues to get him back to where he was, if he gets back to where he was. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks have a good year or 2, get hurt, lose their way, and not make it back. I'm just surprised how many people automatically presume he will be what he was. I'm not convinced. I like Chris Ballard a lot. I like the core that they have there a lot, particularly on the lines. But I don't know if they have enough on the perimeter to do damage. And I understand wanting to re-sign your own guys and keep yourself in good financial shape. But I thought they had to go out there and do do something a little bit aggressive in terms of getting a couple outsiders with their cap surplus. And I thought they were not a little bit, I thought they were a lot of it too timid. I mean, Julio Jones wasn't particularly expensive. That's a guy, to me, who, would have looked awfully good in Indianapolis, and it didn't seem like they were even dipping their toe in the water.
Going back to the Titans, you mentioned the defense, kind of held them back a little bit last year. What do you think went so wrong, and what hope do they have that it can get better?
Well, what went wrong, there's a team who says their number one characteristic for players is that they love ball. They brought in Vic Beasley. You could have called any number of people in Atlanta would have told you that Vic Beasley doesn't love ball. So he gamed them out of $9.5 million, and they were counting on him to boost their pass rush. He didn't do anything. They cut him 6 or 7 games into the season after giving him 9.5 for free. He didn't show up for training camp for 10 days inexplicably. Jadeveon Clowney is a completely overrated player. I don't know. Maybe you guys have these magic eyes where you can see a guy kind of stand around and do nothing, but he's got this unbelievable influence on the game. And, the rest of us aren't smart enough to understand the magnitude of the ways he influences things without getting anywhere near the quarterback. I hope the guys in Cleveland are smart enough to understand this. We weren't in Nashville, a lot of us. He didn't do much in the 8 games that he played. They had no depth at outside linebacker once those 2 guys didn't pan out. They got hurt at cornerback when Adoree Jackson came back with 3 games left. He played like he didn't care. I can't believe the contract he got in New York. Maybe he's got a resurgence, but I had no problem with their moving on there. So 6 of their top 12 are new, starting with Bud Dupree, who, I don't know that he's the greatest pass rusher out there, but he's certainly better than anything they had. Danico Autry's a better defensive end than anything they had. Denoris Jenkins will play the Malcolm Butler role, and then they got a bunch of young cornerbacks, starting with Caleb Farley, that they need to take off. So they basically blame last season on the personnel, and they've changed a lot of the personnel. They think that's the answer. This year it'll be on the coaching. Shane Bowen is officially the defensive coordinator last year. He was last year without the title. He's got the title this year. He said he's got the final word. He needs to make better calls with better people.
A year ago, last season, I would have argued, I thought the Titans were maybe better than the Bills, if not equal, and a bad matchup for the Bills. I thought there was a team that Buffalo didn't want to have to go play in the second round of the playoffs. What was your perception on the flip side of that? Do Titans fans worry about playing the Bills or competing with the Bills in the AFC?
I think Titans fans should have been worried about anybody that had a quarterback who could throw the ball down the field based on their inability to stop people on third down. So, they had beaten Baltimore the year before in the playoffs in Baltimore when Baltimore was the number 1 seed. But I think they were more equipped against Lamar Jackson than Josh Allen or anybody who's a more conventional quarterback, if you will. And they tanked against the Ravens, who figured out a way to stop Derrick Henry. And then the offense let him down, really. Ryan Tannehill had a bad day. Arthur Smith had a bad day. Corey Davis disappeared, like not figuratively, literally, like he was on the bench starting in the 3rd quarter and into the 4th quarter inexplicably and unexplained. So their defense didn't even really have a chance to let them down, and Baltimore didn't have to do much. But last year's defense, I think, wasn't going to go very far in the playoffs as compared to the year before, when you remember they won at New England, won at Baltimore, ran out of gas in Kansas City, where they were overmatched like most teams are. But I think there'd be an interesting matchup with Buffalo again. I'm looking forward to seeing that in the regular season. You've got to get people to stop jumping off bridges down here and onto tables. We've got cement. I don't know if everything is padded up there or what, but that'd be a good extra story not to have out of that game here, somebody fracturing a vertebrae or something.
I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, probably just got to plan for it, right?
Was that Nashville that happened? The
Yeah.
guy, and he didn't break his neck, but it sure looked like it. Matthew was sitting next to me in the press box, and he kept saying, "Should we go cover this?" we may have just watched a guy die trying to be a Bills
People didn't
fan.
know for a few hours what had happened to him, and he got
he
taken
screwed
to the
himself up
hospital.
really bad. He jumped like off the beginning part of a pedestrian bridge, like a steep cement incline, and it was a pretty decent drop from there to where he went. So they ought to look for less height, I think.
And he missed the table, right?
Yeah, I
Either
think he
missed it or he brushed it, or it was a weak table and it didn't make much of a difference in terms of slowing the fall. I mean, gravity works here pretty well.
Paul, what do you think will happen at tight end for the Titans? Because it was a strength last year, and with that running game, of course, Julio Jones mitigates maybe their need for tight end, but what do they do at that position?
I mean, I think right now they've got a flashing neon light. They played. I just looked this up at Warren Sharp's site. They still played the most too tight in the league last year, 35%. So that probably comes down because they got a good package of 3 wide right now, obviously. But if you play 3 wide, you're either putting Anthony Firkser on the field, who's got really good hands, a nice pass catcher, who's not going to block an outside linebacker or defensive end, or you're putting Jeff Swain or a no-name guy who's up and coming now on the field as a blocker. And you're telegraphing run. So it seems to me a bit of a flashing neon sign about your intentions, which maybe isn't the worst. If you've got Derrick Henry running, a lot of people know it's coming anyway. Jones running, it's not like they're going to surprise people by being targeted, but I think you're making it a little bit harder on yourself. And this has been a tight end centric team, really, its whole existence in Tennessee. This is the least talented they've been. John Robinson said after the Julio Jones trade, no, we can't really give up any kind of draft pick of significance or take on any kind of contract of significance at tight end. So everybody's been waiting for the trade there. And Titans fans are getting spoiled. Clowney came on late, even though he didn't do anything. Julio Jones is coming on late. They think there are 3 periods for player acquisition: and free agency in March, the draft in April, and now like June, July, August, where these are really outliers. So I think if these guys don't pan out, maybe they'll be looking for somebody late camp when cuts come around. And they certainly don't have any depth, even if these 2 frontliners do enough for them. So I think it's the one real problematic spot on offense, but they may be able to make it work because the 4 eligibles before the tight end are going to be pretty damn good.
Bills fans have been clamoring for their team to pick up Zach Ertz, who's been dangled by Philly. And you mentioned John Robinson saying that there's really no palate or ability to absorb a player like him or to give up a draft pick for him. But we've known general managers and coaches to lie plenty over the years. Would Zach Ertz be somebody that the Bills might have to worry lands in Tennessee instead of Buffalo?
I think the Titans fans would love that. They've been talking about Zach Ertz forever. I would think he's too expensive, and you'll have to remind me about his injury history, but I'm thinking he's a dinged up guy, and they've taken on a lot of injury guys. I mean, obviously Brown's coming off. Jones is coming off the injury year. They're thinking he's okay. They've got Lewan coming off an ACL. They've got Dupree coming off an ACL, who'd probably be a late starter this season. They drafted Caleb Farley with coming off a microdiscectomy. I don't know how much injury risk you can continue to take on either. So I think that would be a factor for them as well. I'll be surprised if they take on somebody of Ertz's stature, though they could use him.
Paul, what do you think of the Titans are an interesting team because they've got this core of players that they should be in this window where they can contend for a Super Bowl. But I think the big question is at quarterback. And I'm curious what you think internally maybe the belief is in Ryan Tannehill to be that guy, long term, or if this is kind of an important year for him in that regard.
Why do you think he's a question? I mean, he had a terrible playoff game last year. The playoffs before that, Henry was running wild and they didn't need him. Outside of the playoffs, he's been phenomenal.
I think there's some who would say, and I don't know if I fall into this camp or not because I haven't seen him play this year, but a lot of people give a lot of credit to what the offensive coordinator did there the last few years, what they do off of play action, that maybe he's a product of circumstances. You think this is a guy that can keep them in Super Bowl contention year after year?
I think they could win a Super Bowl with him. And I don't understand quarterbacks getting scored down for having good coordinators who know how to use them. Isn't that what we want from a coordinator, to use his quarterback properly? I'm not putting this on you, but there seems to be a lot of this around the country. Like, oh, well, they run so much play action, it covers up Tannehill. They run play action, and Tannehill's terrific at play action. So it's good coaching and it's good quarterbacking. He runs really well, so they hand the ball to Henry a bunch. And every once in a while, they fake it to Henry, and Tannehill runs wide open into the end zone. Do we score Tannehill down because nobody's touching him when he runs, or do we say, hey, that's a really well-designed run play? He's getting punished a lot for being successful out of their circumstances. I think he should get graded up for being successful in their circumstances. Like, they know how to use him, and he's excelling at what they do. I thought that's the whole point of the whole deal.
How do you envision the transition away from Arthur Smith? How do you think this offense will look different, or how it will fare in that transition?
Well, I think, like we're talking about, they have to switch to more 3 wide. That's based on the personnel. I think Arthur Smith's really smart and did a really excellent job, and I think he'll do a really excellent job calling plays for the Falcons, and probably as the CEO for that team. So they're going to miss him. But Todd Downing, I think, was partly hired here for this, in case this happened. He only had a year as the Raiders offensive coordinator. It wasn't a good year, but I think he's a bright guy too. And, you know, we've talked a lot here about the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator. Shaden Bowen's in a position where he really has to do things right in order for the defense to work. I think Downing's in a position where he really has to do things wrong for it not to work, based on the personnel he has and what he inherits.
Hey, we've all, over the course of our careers as sports writers, we've seen plenty of offensive coordinators who figure out a way.
Yeah, I think he's smart enough to know. First and foremost, the formula here is pretty simple, starting with Derrick Henry, right? I mean, this guy is a very, very unique running back. If he doesn't run into his wall, which is coming at some point, but there are no signs of that, and they surely think he's got 2 or 3 years more, and that's their window. You start by giving the ball to Derrick Henry, and you build everything else off of that. If they really bring people forward on Derrick Henry, well, you've got Julio Jones and A.J. Brown running around, you know. One of those guys is probably getting doubled. The one that doesn't get doubled is probably going to have an advantageous matchup. Josh Reynolds is probably never getting doubled and is going to have advantageous matchups. I think Tim Downing is smart enough to realize all these simple things, and that they'll be able to take advantage of those things. This team scored 30 a game last year. I would think they've put themselves in position to be around there. Or better, and the defense now, you know, is equipped to not give up 27 a game, they would hope.
So it sounds like to me, based on what you said earlier, that if you were, you know, throwing on your prognosticator's cap, that you would have had, I'm sorry, you don't wear a cap, especially not on the air.
No.
But if you were going to guess, you would have even before the Julio Jones trade, you would have picked the Titans to win the AFC South.
No, before the Julio Jones trade, I would have had to see some stuff. But yeah, it would have been more about my lack of faith in the Colts than it would have been about my faith in the Titans. I feel pretty good about them now, though I put myself in a hole, and I don't do prognosticating, Tim. You know, at our time at ESPN, I was fighting hard against them making us pick stuff, and I won for a couple more years after you left. But ultimately, they made us pick. I hate rooting for picks. Last year, I went out on a limb and I picked the Titans to go to the Super Bowl in the preseason before the season started. So I can't do that this year. So, you know, I still think Kansas City is the cream of the crop. I like Buffalo a lot, and I see potential for. I don't like Baltimore. I just think Lamar Jackson's too limited for it to work sustained. you're going to have to throw the ball on the perimeter with some sustained success at some point. And I don't know that they can do that on a regular basis, even having drafted and, a good receiver and brought in one. But I think the Chargers could maybe do some damage if the coach is good. I like their personnel. I like the Browns. So I think it'll be really interesting, and I won't be surprised if Kansas City gets picked off. And the Titans are one of the teams that can do it, and the Bills are one of the teams that could do it. I mean, the Bills are very nicely built.
Out of the AFC East, I'll throw the Miami Dolphins in the conversation.
Yeah, I like them
if
too.
We're going to
I
say
don't like
the Chargers,
quarterback that much. I don't like the quarterback that much, but I like what they've got around the quarterback very much. And I think the coach is excellent.
Before we let you go, Paul, I know your arm's getting tired.
I've done a good job changing.
You have, and you're usually when you need to worry about your arm strength while you're online, you usually it's not for this long.
Yeah, you
what?
Speak from experience.
Oh, you know it. What are your thoughts on your beloved Yankees?
They suck. I mean, it's such a badly constructed roster to not have lefties. They've stuck with Sanchez far too long. He's hot right now. They should deal him immediately for anything they could get, and just sacrifice the idea that there's going to be bursts of a hot bat from catcher. Guy can't run the bases. He's on second base with nobody on first base, and he runs.
Are we still talking in metaphors here?
Shortstop.
Are we still talking in? Are we still talking in metaphors when you're talking about bursts of hot bat?
No. I'm talking about that he can hit once in a while. There's a ground ball to shortstop after he hits a double, and he runs. I mean, I'm about to throw batting practice to my kid who's 11. He hasn't run on that play since he was 6. I just don't understand what they're doing. And I'm not big on firing people, but I think it's about time somebody got fired. And I'm not sure. I'm talking about Boone. I might be talking about Cashman. I don't know how he put this team together and thought that it was sufficient. They got guys playing out of position. They got no lefties for a stadium that's built for lefties. It makes no sense. And I stay with this even if they win 10 out of 12 and get into first place. There's no way the Red Sox should be better than the Yankees right now. No way.
Just in the last question from me, this whole controversy with the pitching and the tackification of the ball and the fingers and stuff, and Garrett Cole getting caught up in that. I'm sure you got an opinion on it.
Why is this not a huge scandal? This is massive. Are we so weary now of the sports scandals that we just give up? I mean, this is ridiculous that people are doing this, and Major League Baseball makes it like it's some federal issue, or we're more worried that pace of play is gonna be affected if we deal with it. Have a damn umpire walk to the mound with the pitcher every inning with his glove in the umpire's hand while his glove in his hat while he checks it out. You got to stop it immediately. I don't care that Garrett Cole is a chief offender. I don't care that everybody's doing it. Go from everybody doing it to nobody doing it. Restore normal baseball where a hitter can actually, hit. Nobody wants to see the league hit 238. Nobody wants to see this develop for 5 years. Be fucking proactive and discover something as it's happening instead of after it's happened. I'm watching more baseball than ever, despite the fact that you're screwing up the game monumentally yet again.
It's pretty amazing that they can't, the amount of things that they police, and yet, like you said, an umpire can't just walk out to the mound with the pitcher at the start of every inning. Like, this needs to be something that players are policing themselves on. It's just a bizarre, the latest in a long line of bizarre happenings in baseball.
And why does the union have to be such a factor? I mean, it's the union's batters who are getting screwed too. The union should want fair play. If the union's pitchers are going to be upset, well, the union's batters should be happy. So isn't that a wash?
I mean, it's already one of the hardest things to do in sports is to hit a baseball against some of these pitchers who are throwing 100 miles an hour, and making it any harder is not helping things.
So stupid.
Well, Paul, your son, you're getting ready to throw BP to your son?
I got to go pick him up, and then we're going to come out to these fields that I'm near, and we're going to work on getting stuff back up the middle. And he's a good bunter, but lately he's been a little off. So we got to get that laid down perfectly over by third base so we could use his speed next week at his tournament.
And your son's 26, right?
He's 11.
Yeah. It's been a while. I remember when he was born. What was that, like 11 years ago?
Yeah, about 11 years ago. It's you and I
Hey,
with the
man.
math.
It's great to see you. It's great to hear your voice. It comes through. It still comes through in the texts, but we should do this more often. We don't have to do it while recording, but we should check in with each other a little bit more. I apologize for not
it's all
being
good.
for doing that, but
I hope it was
texts are okay.
good, and I'm glad that we helped that guy not win that thing.
That's right.
Yeah, have fun with
That's
that, fellas. Dig into that, guys.
Hey, Paul, thanks for doing this. Take care. Enjoy BP.
Great to see you, my friend. I'm sorry, boys, about your work partner here.
Nothing we can do.
Yeah. Cheers.
All righty. Take care, Paul. All right. That's Paul Kuharsky. You can check him out at Outkick 360 for his coverage on the Titans. And of course, as you can tell, he's got opinions about a bunch of stuff, a really entertaining guy. He is one of those, he's one of those guys. He obviously has a shtick. He lays it on a bit, but you get it off the air too. And it is a hoot. So it's not disingenuous, I wouldn't say. If you say something's for effect, that's not the same as disingenuous, but he knows. Let's put it this way: he knows he's a load, and he gets a kick out of doing it and getting that reaction. But good dude. So our thanks to Paul Kuharsky. Before we wrap up, Jonah, Matthew, any topics to throw out there?
I feel like we can't. I don't know if we can reach that bar of enthusiasm again. That now that Paul has left, it feels like the air has been sucked out of the room, the virtual
there's
space here.
Not a lot of energy. What's going on with the Bills? Anything to talk about since it's been a mostly football broadcast? Well, let's just throw it out there. What's anything? No.
They've had a few OTA practices that they've allowed us to watch. They're slowly getting back to normal attendance, and they're getting closer to having everybody there. Really, just the defensive line seems to be late to the party. Jerry Hughes' wife is very pregnant down in Texas, so I assume that is why I'm not even expecting him at mandatory minicamp next week. Star Latulilae is out working out somewhere, so he's getting ready for the season. He's just doing it on his own. Stephon Diggs and Emmanuel Sanders missed last week, but I would expect most everybody to be back for mandatory minicamp. 3 days in a row next week, you get a bigger sample size, more context. When you see one practice a week for 3 weeks, a guy could have a lousy day. They could be trying something out new. You don't really get much of a picture. So we'll have a little snippet of a preview. They're not going back to St. John Fisher for training camp. They may never go back to St. John Fisher for training camp, which is fine. I like it being right down the road from my house as opposed to 90 minutes away, but it's an interesting situation that they have going because Brandon Beane spoke on it and said, that it didn't have anything to do with the vaccine and the rate of vaccination on the team, but then, was talking about the protocols, which do have something to do with the vaccine. So I think the space at St. John Fisher just wasn't good enough, regardless of what level of vaccination they have. There's still going to be some protocols. It's just too tight. Didn't make sense compared to what they have at home. The contract's now up, so they can they're training camp free agents a little bit. And I think they've got a pretty good setup at home. I know they've talked a lot about how they like going away, but that might have just been lip service to their partners, down in Rochester and the fans there. I think last year showed that staying home got them pretty prepared for the season. So that's your Bills in 2 minutes, I guess.
Yeah, interesting about training camp. And of course, you have to rely on St. John Fisher staff so heavily. Food services, security, all the different things that have to happen there on campus. And all those people would then have to fall in line with the NFL's testing protocols. And those people don't work for the Bills. So that would have been probably a big enough headache just to say, hey, let's just keep it all in house and not have to worry about it. Yeah, I don't really have an
meeting spaces are smaller.
Yeah.
If you get weather, you're kind of screwed there as opposed to an Orchard Park. I mean, from a football standpoint, they're so much better off in Orchard Park. I think that's true, pandemic or not, but especially with the pandemic, they're a lot better. Why spend all that money on that facility if not for, the time when guys are using it the most, I would say, in terms of getting ready for the season. So they were shortening their time there before the pandemic. If you remember the year before COVID, 2019, they had their fewest practices there. They didn't, really do the night practices in front of the fans. So they've started to shorten it each year. I understand the football guy thing of bonding and going away and, being with your brothers and whatnot. But to me, the work that they get done seems like it would be a lot more efficient. And frankly, I know every team has to come together in its own way, but this team is, they brought back a lot of pieces. These guys know one another. They're pretty tight. They'll get together off the field anyways, during training camp. They don't need to be crammed into dorm rooms together to have some bonding. So I think they're totally fine. I know people kind of dance around the whole thing because it's like, oh yeah, we love the fans in Rochester. I'm sure the fans in Rochester would sacrifice never seeing the Bills in training camp again if it meant that the team consistently won games. And it's not to say that them going away is the reason they didn't, but
attendance was negligible and getting seemingly worse every year. Of course, coming off of, a season like this with Josh Allen, and there's an excitement. There wasn't that malaise of just the drought, but attendance hadn't been great in recent years. You'd get the autograph seekers and you'd get some kids from the local schools, but rarely did you see the diehard Bills fan out there with his roster, looking at, who the next, checking out the team type thing. It was corporate stuff. I mean, it was all just people who were there. Just
it would be good for a few days. You'd get
not many.
It'd be good for like opening day and the first night practice when they would do those. You'd get a pretty good crowd. But Sean McDermott, I think, what I noticed having covered a few coaches before him, he stayed away from that turf field that was a big draw for fans because the setup is a lot better. You can see a lot more. It felt like we were out there covering practice a lot with Doug Marrone and Rex Ryan, and Sean McDermott was out on those grass fields, sometimes in that back corner field, like tucked way in the back, that is terrible for fans. So it was always a utility thing for Sean McDermott. Like, I'm going to practice where it is best for my football team, not where it is best for my football team to be seen. And so, yeah, I remember the atmosphere at a few of those early training camp practices in the Rex Ryan and Doug Marrone eras where, you'd have a good crowd, and Sean McDermott set up the schedule not for maximizing fan viewership, but for maximizing, performance and, exercise science, and had all this calculated. So if you're doing it from that standpoint, if you're looking at it from that, you would say, all right, here's team bonding, which you can't really calculate or put a number on. And here's all the things you can put a number on nowadays, especially with their sports performance team. And I would imagine a lot of that is a lot better. Guys are getting better sleep. Guys are on grass more often. They've got more space. They've got access to all these facilities. It's just objectively a lot better place to do camp. And the only real argument otherwise is, well, they don't get to bond. I mean, I don't know what that does for the team, but there's ways to facilitate that without putting them into dorm rooms and making them sleep on crappy mattresses.
If bonding was so important, then the coaches who do practice at their home facilities, which is a majority, would have their guys bring in cots or sleeping bags or whatever, and we'll all get around and we'll do little team bonding things like the trust fall, and we'll do all this stuff. Maybe we'll do some.
I think didn't the Falcons build dorm rooms? There was a team that built dorms at their facility.
I think
for
the Falcons
camp.
do have something like that because they have but it's also considered the off the charts. It's like a country club. So like you drive up to it and it's a place that you don't want to leave. It's got everything. That's one of the things. Baltimore also, I think, has a really decked out facility.
That's kind of the thing, is you're assuming that the only way to bond is to go to St. John Fisher College, and that by leaving there will be no bonding taking place whatsoever. Last year, there was zero bonding. It was literally prohibited to bond. You could not do it. You had to stay 6 feet away from one another. You could not hang out outside of the facility. You could not be friends. You were just to go to work and do football, and that was it. The most bonding happened on the field. That was as close as you could get to one another. And they had the best season they've had in years. So I think
it's because the other 31 teams weren't allowed to bond. They were all at a deficit.
Right. But you think Josh Allen will have the boys over from time to time. Jerry Hughes and Micah Hyde have been known to do the same. Plenty of opportunities to make that type of thing happen. And all they talked about all last year was how much they missed it and how bummed they were that they couldn't do that type of thing and how hard it was. And they won a ton of games. So I know there's some people that have a sentimental pull to St. John Fisher, and I'm sure the Rochester fans like the ease of access to getting a look at their team. But like I said, I'm pretty sure they would all trade that for a successful team. Not to say that it's a dramatic difference where they're doing training camp, but I would say I think it's a measurable improvement on their ability to prepare for the season being here in Orchard Park.
Buffalo fans like it out there too. As you mentioned, though, when it's on the turf field later in the afternoon, evening practices, not starting at 8 a.m., they like the access, the autograph potential.
But a diminishing crowd, seemingly.
Because the practices were all at 8 in the morning.
And some of them weren't open to fans. And some of them were on that corner field where it was really hard to see. And I will be interested to see what they do for fans, because that was always my thought was, the fan interaction thing is nice. It's a good setup for it at that college. But you could recreate that in Orchard Park pretty easily, I would think. I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off this year. Brandon Beane made it sound like they would figure some stuff out in the stadium, and those would be the practices that are open. And I think it'll make it pretty interesting, inside baseball stuff, for some people. But when practices are open to the fans, we can report pretty much whatever we want, because any average Joe is sitting in the stands seeing all the same things we're seeing. And when it's not open to fans, they can get a little funny with their reporting rules. And I mean, these guys look for an edge any way they can find it. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's, a little bit more limited access to fans for that reason. But I think in the future, they have the space to put bleachers around the practice fields. And, on the days that they can put up with being on turf, they can go in the stadium and invite people out. And obviously they have plenty of space there. So again, it doesn't seem like fans were necessarily the priority with this decision, but in a manner of speaking, they were, because they want to win football games. They want to get the team ready to try to win a Super Bowl, which would probably make the fans happier than any autograph, I would think.
What about the media that likes drinking at the Pittsford pub and sleeping in the dorms and being away from their wives for 2 weeks? They didn't think about them either.
Well, I, for one, am glad to not have to sleep in a dorm, make that drive, put those miles on my car, go to the Pittsford pub. I won't speak for anybody else and maybe the vacation they like to take there from home, but I was crossing my fingers that this would be the case. I'm approximately like 70 miles closer to the stadium in Orchard Park than I am St. John Fisher College, and saves a lot of hours. And sleeping on that dorm bed, Timmy knows, not great.
No, I don't. I slept in one in college, but I never did that. I never did the dorm bed I know that there are some reporters out there that would bring their stuff. Well, you've done it. I think Joe Biscaglia's done it. Yeah, you see guys, they show up with I just couldn't do it. Number one, I think those mattresses are too short for me.
They are,
But
definitely.
I have Marriott points, and if I ever needed to stay over, I was staying in a hotel. I wasn't gonna do that whole dorm scene.
It was fine when I first starting out. I was just in college, so I was like, jumping onto the beat, like barely settled in my own apartment and didn't know anybody. So I was like, I'll stay out here and hang out that was a long camp. My first camp, 2014, it was like 5 weeks long because the stadium was under construction and the locker rooms were being renovated. So they stayed out there a while, and they had the Hall of Fame game, and they had a joint practice with the Steelers, so they were away there. That was a long camp, and it was fine to hunker down in the dorm rooms, and it didn't make a difference to me whether I was in Rochester and Buffalo. Both places felt equally like home at that point. But now, I don't know. You can. I'm just glad that the last few years I was doing a lot of commuting, like going back and forth, just because I didn't want to. Because the practices were in the morning, and you didn't want to be done working at 2:00 and then just like sit out there all day. So I don't know. I think that this is more permanent than they were willing to let on the other day, but their options are open. Maybe they could go do the camp at, I don't know, any old college that they chose. Maybe they'll do what the Cowboys do and maybe fly out to California or something and do something weird. I mean, if bonding is that important, go get yourself a facility that is up to your standards and go get after it.
The Saints went to West Virginia.
Yeah.
Matthew, why does Sean McDermott, he always says, I like going away to training camp, when all evidence and what you hear kind of behind the scenes suggests that he doesn't really like going away to at least St. John Fisher in this training camp situation that they have set up?
I think he says that because I think he says it because there is a part of it that he likes. I think he likes kind of what you're talking about, that you jokingly referred to with the media, the whole like getting away for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it is, and being pulled away from the distractions of home just for a few weeks, the 3 weeks that it's all football, it's all teammates, it's all, all that stuff that football guys like. They did it in Carolina. They did it in Philadelphia. It's what he's known. I think there's a nostalgic element to it for him. It's what most of the league used to do. And now it's becoming increasingly rare. I also think he says it, and I think Brandon Beane says it and makes a point to say it so much because they had the existing contract. They had sponsors to please, and they had more to lose by saying that we hate this, and getting people talking about, oh, they're going to, they had no reason to want to put St. John Fisher College on blast and say, what is this nonsense? Like, we don't want to do this. And so I think part of it was, a little bit of pandering and pleasing the sponsors, the fans out there, not wanting to offend anybody. But I do think there was an element, especially probably in his early years, where the benefit of that was tangible in some way, where it was like, this is a new thing, and we're all going to go into the bunker together and come out ready to play a season. In his first couple of years coaching the team, when he had to win guys over, now it feels like a lot of that, the bonds have formed, the team has been formed, and they can focus a little bit more on what's actually better for getting the work in and, getting yourself ready. But I think it's a mixture of things that makes him say that. But I don't think it's like he's panicking that they're not going to St. John Fisher College. I certainly don't think he's super bent out of shape about it. And they'll find other ways to come together and build lifelong friendships and whatnot.
especially whatnot.
What have you.
Well, we had a full episode, I think. We reconnected with Paul Kuharsky of Outkick 360 to talk about the Titans.
We learned
Old
that we shouldn't wear
ESPN
hats.
pal. Yeah, we were scolded.
We got some show notes, some tips for improvement. And Paul is a pro. Paul has a pretty damn successful show. So I'm thinking next week you're going to see me in a collar and perfectly coiffed hair.
As he
I
stands
wore a
there.
collar and no hat, and he's acting like you guys in your hats and your T-shirts like I don't even exist.
Yeah, you were the example. He should have been propping you up, but as he stands there with his, holding his phone out with one arm and shaking, like he's,
He's backing up in his car. I don't know.
as my shaking. So as my dad used to say, like a dog shitting razor blades. He had a couple others. I can't say. Even
We should have had Sully on to combat Paul's. Sully wears hats every day in the press box everywhere.
We
what was that, Jonah?
We should have Sully, Paul, and Chris Baker on to just have the total cognitive dissonance video segment.
I like it. I think they'd be a good mix. It's so hard to keep up with. If you try to dress to please the old guard of sports writers, you will be changing you better bring multiple outfits. Because when I would walk into the press box in a suit jacket, nice shoes or whatever, Sully would yell at me, "What are you doing? Like, we're not going to a funeral. Like, we're covering a ball game. Like, why are you so dressed up?" Sal Mayron yells at us when "Oh, look at you," like we're trying to show somebody up. And then, I don't know, you try to bring a relaxed vibe and have a good time on a show, and Paul Kuharsky slams you for wearing a hat in the middle of June. I mean, you can't please everybody.
Nope. Just be yourself.
It's all that you can be.
That's what Jonah does.
Mm-hmm. And it works for me. A woman at Wegmans told me she liked my hair the other day, unprompted.
I can't remember the last time I got a compliment.
Any
Away from home or at home?
She startled me. I thought she was going to ask me for money, but she just wanted to tell me she liked my hair.
All right. Thanks to Jonah Bronstein of the New Bronstein Times and Matthew Fairburn of The Athletic. This has been yet another episode of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. CTBK is more than just a full-service accounting firm. They are one team with an innovative approach to accounting and rise to each new challenge with collaborative problem-solving skills. CTBK goes above and beyond by lending helping hands in the Buffalo and Niagara community through volunteer work and donations, and is partnered up with Victory Sports for 2020 and 2021 to keep kids in the community active. The professionals at CTBK are determined to help individuals and businesses succeed. Whether a large corporation, a small business, or somewhere in between, call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400, and see what CTBK's one-team approach can do for you.